Tuesday, September 11th, I got up and was driving to Bethesda. I was starting my second week of teaching here. It was a spectacularly beautiful morning. I had just moved back from Florida, and I truly remember thinking on that drive, you know, Florida was beautiful, but there were never blue skies like this. I was pretty amazed to wake up this morning to see that blue sky, just like it. I was pretty unsure of myself. I mean, not Jewish. I hadn't been in Baltimore in 9 years. So I was a little shaky about finding my place here. And during first period, which I wasn't teaching, the word started to go around, something's happening in New York. And a number of teachers gathered in the library. We didn't have internet or anything, and we weren't even really hooked up to cable, except in the library. So there was a TV set up for teachers. And the first plane had already hit, but while we were standing there, we saw the second one hit. And by the time the period bell rang, the first tower was coming down. So I went to my second period U.S. history class. And by then, although we were kind of told, not told, but suggested that we not, you know, make a production about all this, try to keep things quiet. Students were hearing about it, and they wanted to talk about it. And one of my students in that class is sitting right next to me right now. And I'd like Coach Creeger to tell you about our class that day.
So I was 16, a sophomore, right? Junior in Ms. Allen's history class, and I hadn't heard anything about what was going on when I walked into the period. And at some point during class, I'd gone out in the hallway to use the bathroom and go to the water fountain, and somebody else who was in the hallway, another student, had said something to me along the lines of, somebody flew a plane to the World Trade Center. And I didn't even know how to process that, because I thought he said it so casually that I thought he was making some sort of terrible joke, and I didn't know what are you saying? So I went back into the classroom, and I brought it up, and at that point, Ms. Allen sort of had to address that something was going on, and we had TVs in the classrooms, and but we didn't think we could get the news on the TV. But one of my classmates had a special talent and said, I can get the news up there. So he fiddled with some wires, and we got the news up on the TV and started watching the news feed. And I remember while we were watching, there's nothing to say. You don't know what to do with yourself, with your emotions. There's nothing for Mrs. Allen to say that could make anybody feel right or comfortable with what was going on. And as we're watching, we see the tower, the second tower, start to crumble, and we watch it live, and it falls. And there was silence. It was chilling silence. You're there with all your friends, and nobody knows what to say. And you can't even imagine that something like this is going on until you see those images on the screen. And everything is just frozen. And I distinctly remember the one thing that was said over and over in the class by just one student after another, by Mrs. Allen. It's just all of those people, we just kept whispering it and saying it. And I think chilling is the word. I distinctly remember that feeling of not knowing what to even feel. And it's a very scary thing, but almost comforting at the same time to be experiencing it with all these people that you
sorry, always have more to say. I just want to close. When I was thinking about being on this panel, there were 3 images that kept coming back to me. And this was after the towers had come down. Mayor Rudy Giuliani, in the middle of the day, gave a press conference. And he already knew that he had lost 3 very close personal friends. And yet he's the mayor of a city in this horrible trauma. And he's trying to answer questions, give information, but also be kind of the uplifting leader for his people. And one reporter said to him, "Mayor, how many people do you think we lost today?" And he was stunned, because the way it was stated was so blunt and crass. And he said, "I don't think we want to speculate about that right now." And he paused for a second, and he said, "But I'm afraid it's more than we can bear." Later that night, my husband and I, many of you, or some of you, remember my husband teaching here. We were watching CNN, and they had reporters all over the city. They had them in Washington, they had them everywhere. And the anchor cut away to a correspondent who was at the leading trauma center for the southern part of Manhattan. And she was standing there, and they assumed that she would be covering this story of all the, work being done. And instead, there's all these doctors and nurses just standing out on the sidewalk. Because by then, there weren't any patients. The ones who could make it had been brought in early in the afternoon, and no one had been brought in since. And they were just looking around in a daze. And my last impression, and I'll finish up. The FAA closed the airspace of the United States at around 9:30 that morning. Every plane that was in the air over the U.S. was ordered to land. And a plane approaching the United States from Europe was told they would not be allowed to land in the U.S. They had to divert to Canada or anywhere they could land. But every plane, and at that moment there were over 4,000 planes in the air, every plane had to be on the ground at the closest airport. It took 3 hours to get all those planes safely landed. And it was so eerie in the next couple days, in this busy air corridor that we live in, and the skies were empty. And then 3 days later, all of a sudden, there was an airplane overhead. And the first thing was, oh no. And then there was another. And then another. We were flying again. And it was the first sense that I had that we would get back to some kind of normal life. And I'll never forget that, how blessed I felt to see jets over my head.